Something I realised when displaying my whole Power Rangers collection recently was how much of it was made out of different formats, and how altogether it can start to lose its meaning. There's printed books, stickers, trading cards, watches, home video, and that's before you even get to the stuff made by Bandai. As a complete collection, it can be hard to see it as anything other than just stuff. So I wanted to compare against the same medium. And as I've mentioned, it's usually the Megazords that get me to buy into each season. So despite the recent rain disaster, I still wanted to display all of my Megazords in some kind of timeline in order to see how, I guess, Zord design and toy design have evolved over the last quarter of a century. Obviously I'm missing a number of seasons. At time of posting I have 12 seasons, I've ignored 12 seasons, I've basically got half. You may also notice that I tend to go for very similar themes. I can see this myself in Turbo, In Space, Lightspeed Rescue and Time Force. I generally skip past Animal Zord seasons like Lost Galaxy and Wild Force, the only two of the first 10 years I didn't venture into. I also go for seasons with great combining ability, so Dino Thunder and Mystic Force were seasons I really liked the designs of, but their Zords didn't have any grand combinations outside of their initial ones. So what you'll notice is that my seasons all have excellent secondary combinations. Firstly, I had to get them all out of the box. This was probably the most time-consuming part, and through this process I discovered I had a total of 118 Zords altogether. I do have a bit of regret for not initially displaying all those Zords in their component pieces, but it would have taken too long to have moved everything into position. And I just had no idea how much room that would take up, so I skipped straight to the Warrior or Megazord mode of everything, and through that I got this. What really surprised me was how symmetrical they all were. Even the newer seasons, where I feel the designs aren't as neat as they used to be, they still have a good element of symmetry from their left side to their right. I was also surprised by how blocky or boxy the original Zords now look. Neat, yes, and overall much more compact. The newer stuff is generally chunkier, with more exaggerated proportions. We're now more likely to get an aesthetic shoulder pad or a wing sticking out, whereas older mecha almost seem to want to take up as little space as possible. Most of them now seem to have extra support for standing up, whereas the feet on older Zords, while always very effective back then I thought, now look proportionally smaller than most of the newer stuff. There are some design elements which always seem to carry through though, like horns or spikes on the helmet, and power swords, as always, being a must-have. I think in a way Ninja Storm is a hinge season, because it has an appropriate amount of both styles. You can see from Storm Megazord how bright and vibrant the colours are, and how the different arms give it a much rounder feel. But there's symmetry throughout the rest of the piece, and Thunder Megazord beside it is traditionally conservative, but then with great spikes sticking out the sides of it. Samurai Star was compact, but with an obnoxious star as its main design feature, and Revolver Mammoth returns to the heyday of having a grand Ultrazord finisher, but its proportions are giant. As a whole, I think it's clear all these guys are from the same toy line, not least in that the majority of them are made from multiple Zord components. I think you can see, particularly with those two dinosaur bookend seasons, how much the design has evolved. We have a lot more colour and a lot less uniformity now. We also don't seem to hide the Zords within the transformation as much. If we were to read into this, it's almost like each season's Zords are encouraged to be their own kind of Megazord person, to have their own personality. They all have the same clips which allow them to interact with each other, but they're free to do their own thing in a sense. It's probably a nice message to give to kids. In a way, I think I kind of prefer the original ways of doing things where everything was measured so particularly so that it could fit into somewhere else later on. Deciding on what to put together to represent the most powerful attack of each season was where the fun really started. And in terms of the final combination, you can definitely see trends emerging. Sentai purists will not want to consider the recycling of Titanus as a valid Ultrazord, but it did appear on screen in Power Rangers, even if it was the toy version they had, making your toy version super accurate. Anyway, that's why I switched over to the Legacy Ultrazord to represent Season 1, because I wanted my original Titanus for the Season 3 Ninja Ultrazord. I wanted one linear timeline without any duplicates. That was the goal. You can definitely see Pyramidus as the final true Ultra Zord until the Revolver Mammoth 7 seasons later. I think the idea of the Ultra Zord being a large, somewhat unwieldy beast has definitely remained over the years, even if the definition of it has changed. By today's standards, an Ultra Zord remains an upright warrior, but there's not usually a chariot attachment or anything beneath it. That was good for me for my middle seasons though, and I used that logic in my final combos. Interestingly, I thought as soon as Season 3, we were basically told that an Ultra Zord didn't have to be every Zord, which was how we'd seen it in Seasons 1 and 2. In Season 3, you had to choose whether you wanted the Ninja Ultra Zord or the Shogun Ultra Zord. Season 4 then followed suit. Did you want the Zeo Ultra Zord or the Super Zeo Ultra Zord? Then in Turbo, there wasn't really a true Ultra Zord at all. But you can kind of fake it based on what you see in the show with Artillatron and the Turbo Rescue Megazord, so that's what I've done here. These combinations, I think, look really imposing, and Zeo even gives you a second way to display it in Warrior mode, but I prefer its Chariot mode because it doesn't hide the Zords away. For the next 3 seasons minus Lost Galaxy, I think there is a strong combination which looks very dissimilar to its combining parts, which is why I consider these to be the final attack modes here. The uniqueness of the combination being why I put Astro Delta ahead of Winged Mega Voyager, even though that in the traditional sense is more of a 6 Ranger combo. My final 3, sort of 4 seasons, Ninja Storm, Super Mega Force and Dino Charge, all have similarly sized what I would consider to be final combinations. They all have these exaggerated stylistic elements sticking out of them, but I like that and I think it's meant to represent the power of them. The difference comes, however, in that the Ninja Storm still has an Ultra Zord to fit into. Fitting into this makes the Ninja Storm Ultra Zord tower over its future equivalents, along with every previous combination. Yet another reason why Ninja Storm is such a hinge season. The original Ultra Zord will always be the most iconic, I think. You can see they've tried multiple times to come up with something as memorable, but that first Ultra Zord just had it, and its success set the standard that they'll probably keep trying to reach. The Ultra Zords we get now tend to be created from much smaller parts, probably created by a reluctance to keep creating these large, high price tag, big box on the shelf type items. I think short term, that's fine, it gives us a bit of variation in terms of what an Ultra Zord is, but longer term I do hope it's just a temporary measure and we return to having these quite giant spectacle Ultra Zords, because although they're certainly not cheap, they really are impressive to look at. And they're very fun to put together, most of them. So that's it. This concludes my look back at my entire Power Rangers collection. I hope you've enjoyed this whirlwind tour and that you've learned from my mistakes on when is an acceptable time of year to display your collection outdoors. I also hope that seeing lots of Megazords together is maybe giving you some ideas for what you'd like to add to your collection next. Thank you to everyone that keeps commenting on my videos and my pictures over on Instagram at Power Rangergram. It's thanks to you that I found out that I was displaying the Turbo Rescue Megazord wrongly, with the arms not extended. Yeah, I won't be doing that next time. But glad to see it's been such a blast from the past for so many of you. And that, in a sense, almost makes up for the fact that everything got wet. But no, it is good to be able to share these things with people, not just have them sat in boxes all the time. So, hope you've enjoyed this, and as ever, see you later.